Alright, so we're going to go over how to factor. So our first thing is that we want it in that standard form. So when I say standard form, I mean that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So as we can see over here, this is our ax squared term, so we're just going to bring that guy down. And then we've got this right here, which is our b term, so we're going to bring that down. And our -4 is over on this side. We got to move it to the other side, so we're going to add 4 to both sides, which is going to have this be plus 4 equals 0. Notice how I'm in standard form. This equation right here looks exactly like this equation up here. Alright, so now we're going to do the big X method. And your teacher might use a different method, or you might use a different method, and that's fine as long as you get the same answer. It does not matter. So the big X method is where you draw an X, and you're going to put your A times C term up at the top, and your B term is down at the bottom. When I say A times C term, what I mean is take the number in the front and multiply it by the number that's in the back, if you have it written out in standard form. So my A term here is going to be 1, and my C term is going to be 4. So I multiply 1 times 4, that's going to give me 4. Our B term is going to be this term that's next to the X. So that's going to be -5. So I'm going to put that right here. So now I need two numbers that if I multiply them together, I get 4. But if I add them together, I get -5. So factors of 4. Let's list out factors of 4. So 1, 2 times 2, and 4. So which one of these, if I add them together, I get 5? Well, a lot of y'all like to do this whole thing where you say 1 times 2 are factors of 4, but it doesn't add up to give me 5. Or you do 2 times 2 is 4, but that doesn't add together to give me 5 either. So we've got 1 and 4. But we're going to make both of those negative. And the reason why we're going to make both of those negative is because we're trying to get to a -5. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to put it in our box. So that's going to look like this. Yes, my box is so perfect. Alright, so we're going to take our first term, we're going to put it in the first box. We're going to take our last term and put it in our last box. And those two terms that we just found, we're going to slap an X onto them or slap an A onto them. We're going to put them inside this box right here. And you could rewrite these in either way. For instance, you could put the -4a down here and the -1a right here. It doesn't matter. But now what we're going to do is we're going to take the greatest common factor from each row and column. So out of this column, the greatest common factor is going to be A. Out of this column, the greatest common factor is going to be -4. Out of this row, it's going to be A. And out of this row, it's going to be -1. And the reason why this is going to be -1 and this is going to be -4, the way I do it is I look at the number that's inside the box and I say, what times A will give me -1a? Well, that's -1. And what times A will give me -4a? And that's -4. And I know that -4 times -1 is +4, so that just checks out. So if I write this out in factored form, I'm going to get A minus 1 times A minus 4. Alright. So on number 2, we're going to write this out in our standard equation form. Okay, so we're going to subtract 13p from both sides because we want all of our numbers on one side. When we do that, we're going to get p squared minus 13p plus 42 equals 0. And so now we're going to do our big X method. So A, which is 1, times C, which is 42, that's going to give me 42. B is going to give me -13. So what two numbers can I multiply together to give me 42? So let's list out factors of 42. 1, 2, 3, 21, 42, 6, 7. So, which one of these can I add together to give me negative 13? Well, negative 6 and negative 7 give me negative 13. So now I'm going to do the box method. And the reason why I'm doing the box method is so, hey babe, how are you? Alright, so when we do the box, and the reason why we're doing that box is because, let's say for instance, if our A term is bigger than 1, then we've got to do this box because that's going to change up our factors. Otherwise, you can just put this P in front of here, and I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm going to take my first term, put it in the first box, last term, put it in the last box, and these two terms that I just found, I'm going to put them right here and here. And I'm going to take the greatest common factor from my rows and columns. So when I do that, it's going to look like this. And again, you do it out of the column. So out of these two numbers, what do they have in common? Out of these two numbers, what do they have in common? These two numbers, these two numbers. So you'll get P minus 6 times P minus 7. And notice how I could have taken these numbers up here and just put a P in front of them, and I get the same thing. But that's because my coefficient in the front is going to be 1. Alright, so now we're going to move into something called factoring by grouping. So with factoring by grouping, what you're going to do is you've got 4 terms, and you're going to use parentheses in order to help you kind of just group them. So we're going to take the first 2 terms, and we're going to put parentheses around those. And we're going to say, what are the greatest common factor from these? Well, they both have an x squared in common, so I'm going to pull that out. And they both have a 2 in common. So if I take 12x cubed and I divide it by 2x squared, that's going to give me 6x. If I take negative 10x squared and I divide it by 2x squared, that's going to give me negative 5. Now, if I do the same thing over here, I put the parentheses up, and I say, what is the greatest common factor between 30x and negative 25? That's going to give me positive 6. And if I take 30x and I divide it by, it's going to give me positive 5. I don't know why I put 6. Okay, so 30x divided by 5, that's going to give me positive 6x. That's where that came from. Negative 25 divided by 5 is going to give me negative 5. Well, notice how these two parentheses are the exact same thing. So I can cancel out the last one because we don't need it. And we'll see that in just a second. And we're going to rewrite what is inside of the parentheses. And then everything that's left over on the outside, so this and this, we're going to smush it together and write it out. So it's going to look like that. The reason why we didn't need this other parentheses is if we actually multiplied this all the way out, we would get like 6x times 2x squared is going to give us 12x cubed. Now if we multiplied this original equation, that's actually going to give us something more than x cubed. And we don't want that. We want the original equation. So that's how you factor by grouping. And you can try number 4. I'm just going to post the work for this one because it's the exact same process. So if you want to pause the video and kind of try it on your own.
I accidentally stole this.
Alright, so that's what you would get if you factored by grouping. And again, if you have questions on this one, come and talk to me if you want. But basically, I took out the greatest common factor from here. That's how I got x squared. Out of here, there's 8. And if it repeats, we're going to cancel it out. And we're going to rewrite it like this. So last 2 problems. So on this first one, what we want to do is rewrite it in standard form. So we're going to move that 2a to the other side. And that's going to give me a squared minus 2a minus 3 equals 0. And again, we're going to do our big X method. A times c is going to give us negative 3, and b is going to give us negative 2. So what 2 numbers, if I multiply together, will I get negative 3? But if I add them together, I get negative 2. Well, factors of 3 are 1 and 3. All right, so we don't really have much of a choice. we have to just manipulate 1 and 3. But I want to make it add up to be -2. So I'm going to make that 3 negative. So this will give me, in my box, a squared in the first box, -3 in the last box, and these two numbers that I got on the side. And now I'm going to take out my greatest common factor. So this will give me a minus 3, a plus 1. So my final answer will be a minus 3 times a plus 1. On number 6, I'm going to put this in standard form. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides. So that'll give me n squared plus 8n plus 12 equals 0. Big X. A times C is going to give me 12. B is going to give me 8. So what two numbers will make that happen? So what are factors of 12? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And which ones can I add together to give me 8? Well, 6 and 2. So on this one, I'm just going to show you the connection. We're not going to do the box part because our coefficient is 1. So we really don't have to do that. You want to save ink or paper or whatever. So my final answer is going to be p plus, or n plus 2. N plus 2 times n plus 6. And it would be the same thing if you actually did the box method. So there's just a quick tutorial on how to factor